Okay, Unit 8, Lecture 1, we're going to go into the Roaring Twenties. We've just come back from World War I. There's going to be some changes in American attitudes, the way we look at things. We're going to try and go back to the way things were before the war, actually even before progressivism a little bit, what we're going to call a return to normalcy. All right, there's going to be, like I said, a little kickback towards the progressive movement of return. We'll see 3 Republican presidents right in a row, laissez-faire Republican presidents who want to keep their hands off the economy. A rise in nativism, a rise in the KKK, all sorts of changes we're going to talk about as we go into this. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about the media. Okay, so the United States as a whole in the 20s is doing well. It's a decade of prosperity. Prosperity means everyone's doing okay, getting better monetarily, financially, all right? And popular culture is going to reflect the prosperity of this era. New forms of mass media, media that reaches the masses, and communications and challenges to traditional values are going to lead many American observers to refer to this decade as the Roaring Twenties. All right, so these new forms of mass media continue to affect American culture throughout the 1930s and the dark days of the Great Depression. These things are radio and movies, revolutionized mass media, all right, and communications. Important new developments are going to occur in newspaper and magazine industries. All right, so together, radio, movies, newspapers, and magazines are going to promote challenges to traditional values and help begin creating American identity, American culture. Okay, so radio broadcasts begin in 1920 when KDKA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania reported that year's presidential election returns. All right, by 1929, nearly 40% of American homes owned radios. Americans listened to radios and radio programming just like they would watch TVs today. Okay, you come home from school, you turn on your favorite, whatever it is, series, comedy, or The Lone Ranger, something like that. So there's programs on the radio, the family sits around and listens to it just like they would watch TV today. Okay, so radio advertising is going to create national markets for consumer products. We're going to see by broadcasting jazz, radio made this new style of music both popular and respectable nationwide. Okay, throughout the 1930s, Franklin Delano Roosevelt will use radio talks very effectively called fireside chats to reassure and inform the American people during the Great Depression. Okay, so the media really changes, can bring people together across the whole nation. Like I said, help create this idea of an American identity, American culture, bring us all closer together, shrink the country. All right, so during the decade of the 20s, silent films became a major form of entertainment in America. Then in 1927, movies gained sound with the release of the first talking picture called The Jazz Singer. Okay, movies created national stars like Rudolph Valentino, Mary Pickford, Clara Bow, and maybe you've heard of Charlie Chaplin. All right, so movie stars continued to gain popularity during the Depression years of the 30s when films provided an escape from Depression-era realities. Okay, newspapers and magazines also influenced American popular culture. We have Reader's Digest, Time, the Saturday Evening Post, all appealed to a general middle-class audience. These and other magazines and newspapers shaped cultural norms and sparked fads. All right, fads remind me to ask you, or you ask me, what a fad is when we get to class. All right, so revolutionary changes in mass media and communications brought immense social change to the United States. Because many of these changes challenged traditional American values, they led to a conservative reaction, conservative resistance to change, okay, and social conflict. We see during this time a bit of a negative reaction to progressivism. People and people feel the need to return to laissez-faire economics. There's going to be a crackdown on union, again by government, a return to isolationism, okay, and religious fundamentalism. I think I've talked about this before in class. We tend to periodically look back and say, boy, they were much more religious back then. We have to go back to that. We're losing sight of what we were. Okay, and it's not necessarily ever true. I'm going to stop there with Unit 8, Lecture 1, and pick up in a minute.